Hello, I'm David Powell.
Hello, I'm Duncan Shaw from the University of Manchester, and this video gives you a bit of an introduction to community emergency hubs. What we're going to do in the next 15 minutes is take you through the different parts of the module and try to give you a little bit more information about why you might want to consider emergency hubs and how you're actually going to develop one with your community.
So I think most of you know by now that we've been very much inspired by colleagues, friends over in New Zealand, but we've also seen community hubs work elsewhere. In Chile, for example, on much smaller scale, localized incidents such as the tornado in Conception in 2019, when Duncan and I were lucky enough to see a community come together, spontaneously set up a hub where people coalesced and began to help each other through a rather traumatic and difficult period.
What we saw during all of those examples is that society will come. Society will act, they will prioritise. And so now the challenge is, well, how do you help society to surge in a way that maximizes its benefit? When a disruption happens, people will go home, they'll check on their home, they'll check their family, make sure everybody's safe, check on their neighbours and see if there's anything that they can do to help, or indeed anything their neighbours can do to help them. They might do the same at the street level. But once the issues have been solved locally, then people can start to coalesce. So using what is available locally, the assets that they've got, to address the needs that they can see locally, the needs that people have who've been affected, and identify where people are able to help and support each other. This is very much sitting underneath our approach to community emergency hubs.
Where do the hubs fit? Interesting question. So we think that a community emergency hub could work for every disruption in a community, not just what we would recognise to be emergencies, but including things like power outage, localised flooding, or another crisis that's affecting a community. A hub would allow communities to come together and solve any of those problems, no matter what the source. It can also start whenever the community wants it to start or is ready for it to start. And of course, it can fit in and complement other initiatives that are happening around spontaneous volunteering, the actions of the organised local community groups and voluntary sector, and of course, things that local businesses may be doing to try to resolve problems. And it can both be supported by and support the work of the official response, the police, fire, health colleagues, local authorities, who are also grappling with some of the bigger problems around the emergency. So we think this fits centrally, but most critically helps communities start to solve their own problems using what they've got available to them.
So the CHUB module has 6 parts to it. The first part's a briefing for the Resilience Partnership on why they might want to consider developing a CHUBS approach. Part 2 is the community workshop. So this is bringing community together to listen to their ideas and to help them to understand what CHUBS is and why they might want to take this on as part of their role. Parts 3, 4 and 5 are for the community. So part 3 being a guide of how to set up a CHUB. Part 4 being a safety briefing for volunteers so that they understand how to work safely. Part 5 is the box of all the materials and the resources for a community to run a CHUB. And then part 6 are all of the materials that you might want to use, including this presentation, including some of the lanyards, all the things that you might want to take and print off in order to create that box.
So just to walk you very briefly through each of those parts in a little bit more detail, let's start with part 1, the briefing for resilience partnerships. So as Duncan said, this is very much about trying to remind people why we think CHUBs can be good, why they fit within the official response. But they have a number of objectives. The first one being to provide information and advice to the community that's been affected by a disruption, then to allow that community to focus their response using what's available to them to give the most help to those people who may be in need. Obviously, to use the system to be able to match people's offers of help to those who might need that help, or indeed just gather assets that can be of use to the communities. It can also, of course, just provide a very safe and supportive gathering place for vulnerable people in particular to come together in order to be warm, safe, and given information. And then importantly, it can connect the community with the local council and the emergency services as part of the official response, so they can both talk to the responders about what they need, but also let the responders know about what's actually going on within that community.
So once the Resilience Partnership has decided that it wants to take a Chubb's approach, then it's about bringing the community on board as well. And the LRF can set up a community workshop, invite all of the people who they want to have involved in this, all of the people from the community who might want to participate, and develop an approach to Chubb's based on community development. So it's about running community development workshops with the community on why should they want to run a Chubb, what are the assets that they've got, what activities can the community support during a disruption. You can actually trial the Community Emergency Hub with the community during that workshop and help them to understand how they can actually activate this, so that when a disruption happens, once they've supported everything at their home and their neighbours and so forth, then they can come out and develop this community emergency hub.
So part 3, the guide for communities, is probably the most important part of the module. It gives communities enough information in a very user-friendly, accessible style to be able to run a hub very quickly by itself. So the 8 sections include both the introduction, the objectives of what you try to achieve with the hub, but also a little bit more information about the wider response, so they understand what else might be going on in the bigger picture. It gives some very clear and easy guidance as how to set up a hub, some of the initial activities that Duncan was just describing, and then how to work as a team with a number of specific roles to help the community come together and start to put a little bit of structure without it being too onerous. There's also critically a safety briefing for all volunteers, where it's made clear that nobody is being asked to do something that is risky, too dangerous, or beyond their capabilities. And then a little bit about why hubs could be incredibly important in longer term recovery, and of course some of the broader community capacity building beyond the emergency or the disruption itself.
So part 4 is that safety briefing that David's just mentioned. And key here is about keeping it simple. And David kept using the word easy. And it's about creating something that is almost so intuitive that people are able to do it without a lot of direction. And the safety briefing is simply one page that volunteers can read, and it contains all of the important information in a really accessible manner. So it's not about putting a huge amount of onus of, well, let's watch a video, now we've got to prepare a video, we've got to do it. Everything that you need to develop Chubb's is in the 6 different parts.
And then part 5, we call it the box, the Community Emergency Hub box. In reality, this is the opportunity, I guess, for you locally to think about how you might engage some of your local businesses or other organisations to help you fund what would be an incredibly cost-effective, small-scale investment in creating, a container box that can be put into any community in any location they choose to run a hub from, that has everything in it that this module would provide. So a copy of the guide itself, maps of that local community, lanyards for those roles to be displayed, so it's clear to everybody who enters the hub who is undertaking which of the roles, some basic stationery, the safety briefing that can be read by volunteers or read to volunteers, and then any other equipment that you think might be useful. For example, a wind-up AM, FM radio to allow people to keep in touch when there's a loss of power with what's going on in the wider world. But to repeat, a very simple, very easy design set of materials that help communities crack on with solving their own problems, but a fantastic opportunity here for you to think about how you might engage wider business organizations and helping you to market, fund, and share this with communities who are interested in pursuing community hubs.
And part 6 brings together all of these different materials that David's just mentioned, from the lanyards, the signage, the safety briefing, different presentations that are available, the documents that you might want to make available from parts 1 to 4, the video introduction, this video introduction, and webinars that we've been running on Chubbs, both from New Zealand and the way in which they have developed the Chubbs module, but also from other places within the UK that have been taking different approaches to community emergency hubs. So all of these materials are available. Hopefully they make the job a little bit easier of where do I start with community emergency hubs? How do I get my community involved in that? How do I persuade my Resilience Partnership that this is something that is good to do? And then, how do we actually implement this within the community?
So I guess really it's over to you. So community emergency hubs was something that the consortium members were very keen for us to prioritise the first part of the capability modules. And we wish you the very best with your work on Chubbs. We'd be delighted to hear from you how you get on, and we're certainly available to answer any questions. Please reach out to us at the contact details that are on the slide. But yeah, over to you and enjoy.
Yeah, good luck. Let us know how you get on. Thank you.